get started here today. And while we give a few more folks a chance to join the webinar, I hope you might be willing to put your names and institutional affiliations into our chat so that we can create a bit more of a community feeling about this event. And we'll just take a couple minutes before we get started to do that. Okay, so I think we can get started now. I think we have critical mass, and thank you so much for joining our webinar on women's empowerment in Haiti today, and happy International Women's Day and Women's History Month. We're looking forward to a really powerful and inspiring conversation. Before we get started, I just want to have our fabulous interpreters and language justice activists explain the translation features of this webinar. Natasha, if you could give an overview.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natasha Zamor, and I will be providing interpretation along with my colleague, Christelle. In order to respect the language justice, which makes it important that anybody can express themselves and listen in the language that they're more comfortable in. So in order to use the interpretation function for Zoom, I added the instruction, written instruction in the chat. So if you want to follow, or if you forget and you want to go back to it, I will say that everybody needs to activate the Zoom interpretation. You have to click on the little globe in the bottom of your screen. At that time, you click on the language of your choice. And if you don't want to hear any background noise, you will click mute original audio, and then done. If you are English speaking only, please still try to pick English, because there's a possibility that we toggle between languages, and that way you won't have to do it, we will. If you have a phone or a tablet, you will see 3 little dots in the bottom of your screen. Click on it, and you will also find a language of your choice. So you click on the one that you want, Haitian, Creole, or English. Then click mute original audio, and then done. Donc, bon, ba explikasyon en créole tout. Nous remercions que la journée pour webinar ça. Et il est très important pour nous comprendre que gen en place pour justice linguistique dans le groupe ça. Justice linguistique, c'est pour tout le monde gen confort pour yo participer et puis pour yo parler dans langue qui plus confortable pour yo. Donc, pour qu'à utiliser fonction Zoom pour interprétation, ou après en bas écran, on globe terrestre. Vous cliquez sur lui. Là, vous cliquez, vous choisissez langue que vous voulez participer ou bien que vous voulez tendre. Si vous ne voulez pas tendre bruit de fond, cliquez sur Mute Original Audio. Si c'est sur une tablette ou bien sur un téléphone, ou après 3 petits points en bas à droite, vous cliquez sur lui. Encore une fois, vous après langue, vous choisissez anglais ou bien créole. Vous cliquez sur Mute Original Audio et vous cliquez sur Done. Nous t'aimerais rappeler tous les participants que le temps pris, l'état très important pour nous parler d'une à la fois, que nous gagnons un temps modéré pour nous gagner temps pour nous traduire toute information, pour nous pas perdre information. Let me say that a little bit in English. Please, for all the participants, when you do speak, please speak in a moderate tone, and please one at a time. If you are not speaking, click your microphone off so that there is no background noise. Thank you and have a good webinar.
Thank you very much for that, Natasha. And we're so glad that we're able to bring today's event in both English and Creole. As Natasha said, it's so incredibly important for people to access events in the language of their choosing. So I want to start by giving the floor to IJDH Executive Director Brian Concannon, and just a reminder to keep sharing your names and institutional affiliations as you join us today. It's really wonderful to see all of the amazing folks with us in the audience. Brian, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Sasha. On behalf of everybody, on behalf of Mario Joseph at the Bureau des Avocats Internationaux and myself, I would like to express how excited we are to be hosting this webinar. And I'd like to welcome everyone to it. At BAI and IJDH, we have long believed that equality, empowerment, and full enforcement of women's rights must be central to any effort to establish democracy and justice in Haiti. This is true, first of all, because women and girls constitute half of all Haitians, so any progress that does not bring women and girls closer to equality is unacceptably limited. But progress towards equality for women is also essential for men and boys. If we want a stable, prosperous Haiti, or United States for that matter, we are going to need all of the skills, ideas, energy, and inspiration that women can contribute. Limiting women's rights may preserve men's privilege in the short term, but it also limits the contributions that women can make and condemns all of us to slower progress towards democracy at best. This is why, even as women lead this webinar and other efforts, I and other men and boys must be part of those efforts and stand as partners and allies. If we are serious about democracy, we must be feminists. The current crisis in Haiti is an excellent time to be having this discussion. We have the opportunity to insist now that progress for women cannot wait for the resolution of Haiti's crisis, and is in fact essential to the resolution. We also have the opportunity to learn how to advance equality in the midst of crisis from our courageous and tenacious panelists. We hope that today's webinar will be a launching point for more effective work, wider collaborations, and more significant impact. I look forward to all of us discussing how we can seize this opportunity to create a more equal future for Haitian women and girls. Finally, I would like to thank my colleague Sasha and her team for their hard and thoughtful work bringing this webinar to us today. And I'm grateful to Natasha and Christelle for advancing language justice with their interpretation.
Thank you, Brian, for that introduction and for affirming the centrality of women's rights to the broader fight for justice and democracy in Haiti and elsewhere. I think there's always a tension between giving primacy to women's voices in events like these and the need for this to be an issue that concerns everyone, regardless of gender or other characteristics. It's wonderful to have such a strong affirmation of solidarity and priority. As one of my favorite authors, Chimamanda Adichie, says, and Brian just echoed, we should all be feminists. It is widely acknowledged that gender equality is the #1 predictor of peace. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development explicitly recognizes the participation of women in electoral and political processes as a vital contributor to more stable and more prosperous societies. There are extensive, varied studies showing that increasing equality for women and girls benefits all of society, including men and boys. Indeed, it is one of the most effective ways to fight extreme poverty and build healthier, wealthier, and more educated communities. Yet, as Brian said, women's needs and gender justice are often pushed to the side during moments of extremis, even as violence against women and girls tends to rise with conflict and major social shocks like natural disasters or the pandemic. We have unfortunately seen this play out yet again over the last 2 years around the globe and in Haiti in particular. Thus, our subject today, the fight for women's rights in Haiti, is urgently important. It also doesn't just impact the well-being of Haitian women and girls, although that would be enough to make it a priority in and of itself. it is also critical to efforts towards a safer, more stable, more democratic Haiti as a whole. This is a fight that the three women we're lucky to have in conversation with us today lead. They are Monique Kleska, Pascal Solage, and Marie Katia Dorsant-Lefruy, who is stepping in for her colleague, Gladys Termizi, who is unfortunately unable to join us today due to the continuing insecurity in Haiti. I will introduce each of these amazing women momentarily and will ask each to share some opening thoughts about the fight for women's rights in Haiti, followed by a moderated discussion. We will then open the floor to questions from the audience. So I encourage you to please put your questions in the chat during our discussion, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. So we'll start with Pascal Solage. Pascal studied finance in Haiti and trained in gender and development and human rights education in Europe and Canada. After years of professional work with international and local organizations, the Haitian Public Administration, and the Haitian media, in 2015, Pascal founded the feminist organization Neges Mawon, which has as its goal to promote, advocate for, and strengthen the rights of women and girls in Haiti. She has been its general coordinator since 2017. Pascal is also the co-founder of New Pap Domi, a collective of citizens committed to social justice who have been combating corruption and impunity in Haiti. And one of my favorite facts about Pascal is that she ran for mayor of Port-au-Prince when she was just 25. She identifies as a feminist. So Pascal, thank you for being with us today. And to get us started, I want to note that the organization you co-founded and coordinate, Neges Mawon, is dedicated to improving conditions for women and girls in Haiti, including through organizing at the grassroots level alongside women leaders and survivors of gender-based violence. IJDH, together with BAI and Commission Femmes Victimes pour Victimes, COFAVIV, submitted a report for this year's Universal Periodic Review of Haiti's human rights performance that found high and rising levels of gender-based violence in Haiti, driven by, among other things, women and girls' unequal status in Haitian society, and exacerbated by added stressors like insecurity, environmental disasters, and the pandemic. Can you talk about the status of women and girls in Haiti and the challenges they face in their efforts to achieve full equality and security of persons, drawing especially on your experience organizing women in rural communities as well as in Port-au-Prince? I'm hoping that you can also touch on what advocacy for women's empowerment looks like in Haiti right now, perhaps sharing some of your own experience with the violence and intimidation directed at these efforts.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's a real honor being here today and being with all those wonderful women for this panel. For your question, Alexandra, I think we must not isolate women's condition in situation from the overall context of the country of Haiti. And we have to do a quick contextualization of the country that we talk about. So it's a country with more than 3 centuries of slavery, colonization, a conservative country dominated by religion, and a deeply patriarchal society. So Haiti faces recurring social, political, security, and economic challenge with systemic and structural problems. So today, Haiti is ranked 170 out of 189 countries in 2020, and social inequality are stark, with the richest people in the country with 20% of the population owning more than 64% of the country's total wealth. So in 2021, we had 4.4 million, or about 40% of the population will need humanitarian assistance. And in 2019, this was an estimated population of 11.25 million with over 52% of women. So this is a country was also exposed to natural disasters, mainly hurricanes, flood, earthquakes, and all the effects of climate change. So more than 96% of the population exposed to this type of shocks. So this is a country that has been plagued by corruption and poor governance for decades. And 1/3 of the city of Port-au-Prince is under the control of 94 armed gangs and nearly 170 throughout of the country, for a total of 3,000 fighters. So as we know, in unequal and patriarchal societies, conflict and situation of instability exacerbate pre-existing patterns of discrimination against women and girls, and exposing them to increased risk of human rights violation due to the general breakdown of the rule of law, the free flow of arms, the degradation of the minimal social, political, and economic structures that exist, the normalization of the violence and in general, and in the lack of having access to services. And I think all those information give a general idea of the situation in the country and the situation of the women in the country. So in this context, what is the status of women and girls in Haiti today? So we must understand that historically, the status of women in Haiti has been inferior in Haitian society. So when we founded the feminist organization Neges Mao, the name of the organization comes from Neg Mao. Neg Mao is one of the greatest symbols of freedom, rebellion, revolt in the battle for Haitian independence. And the name of our organization feminized this symbol because we wanted to begin to express our will to fight the invisibilization of women, their contribution in the construction of our society, of our nation. So women were at the forefront of the battle to abolish slavery, but after the Declaration of Independence, they were already relegated to second-class citizenship. But Asian women have always been on the war path to fight for their civil and political right, to claim the full enjoyment of their humanity. And since the creation of the first feminist organization in Haiti, the Ligue Féminine d'Action Sociale, many victories have been won, many advances have been made for women's rights. And today, Asian women are still at the forefront of all social fights, but also mobilized to continue to claim their right in their country. So today is the International Women's Rights Day, but 3rd April 3rd is the National Day of the Asian Women's Movement. And we have to fight for our rights today again, because at the level of the civil and political rights, despite a minimum quota of 30% of women in all decision-making positions of national life, especially in public services since 2012, in the so-called amended version in the Constitution, there's still an underrepresentation of women in all spaces in the countries, of all spaces of power spaces in the countries. So it should be remembered that women have the right to be elected only since 1950 in Haiti, and women have not had the status of legal minors until 1982. So in the last legislature, 3 women were elected as deputies out of 119, and 1 woman as senator of in Haiti. So in spite of the presence of at least 1 woman in the office of mayor, these elected women didn't mobilize a capital of power, allowing them to change things in the country. So there is a deficit of real power of these women in these spaces because the political situation are weakened, so they don't fulfill their roles, but they are also led by corruption, violence, and abuse. And after that, there are real barriers for women who want to get involved in politics in a country where the monopoly of violence is in the hand of men and where they have been able to organize political space to function in a patriarchal, violent, corrupt pattern. So in Haiti, they said, "Zaffaires politique, pas affaires femmes." So politics don't concern women. So this expression expressed very well the perception and attitude of the society almost as a whole toward women who are interested in public affairs. So as former candidate, I have this experience of violence as a woman, as a citizen, as an activist, and as a former candidate in election. And I still live it today. But Asian women are more determined than ever today to take their place. And as Monique will say, fuck yola, fuck nula, the women must be there. We don't give up and we don't negotiate today our citizenship and our power. But women, the first victim of social inequalities and discrimination in Haiti, the term of feminization of poverty is used, but I prefer to talk about the impoverishment of women. Since women receive lower salaries than men, are more likely to work in the informal sector without the right to social security and are less represented in formal employment, without forgetting that more than 60% of families are single parent families headed by women. So they have access to to less resources and less opportunities. So Haiti has the highest maternal mortality rate in the Caribbean. Women's sexual and reproductive rights are still a big challenge, and the average age of early pregnancy continues to decline, and abortion is criminalized. There is no law to punish violence against women in the country, even though women are subject to it every day all over the country. Rape was only criminalized in 2015, and yet Haiti has won a great victory. So girls were still not allowed to go to high school before, but today this is a victory. We have more girls in school than boys, but unfortunately, there is a higher dropout rate for girls than for boys in the country. So at all levels of society, women and girls have an inferior status and suffer daily discrimination, exclusion, violence, and inequality. And the challenge for them to achieve equality and security. How can we achieve equality in a country where we don't even enjoy our humanity, where human life has no value? You see the data for insecurity, where human life has no value, sir, but in a country where every citizen sees a most basic right violated every day, where we can have access to any services, to any dignity. So in a country where we try to sweep us of our sovereignty and freedom, in a country where there's a destruction of institution, but without forgetting that the same institutions are organized to discriminate against women. So to be a feminist today in Haiti, it's also to face the violence in all its form as a result of the rise of anti-feminism in the world, the lack of resources, and the third world treatment of women's rights in the country of the South. So we suffer this violence in an institutional, individual, and collective way. So the challenge to be a feminist and to fight for our rights is to understand that we cannot avoid leading a global political struggle in Haiti or isolating the struggle for women's rights outside of popular struggle, because otherwise the feminist political agenda will not succeed. And the challenges are multiple and complex, but Asian women are fighting. We're fighting every day, and we're winning too. We have victories, and we are all all fronts. So there is no challenge big enough to prevent us from achieving equalities for women in our country. And I know that Monique will say the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. That was such a powerful introduction, and I'm so looking forward to Monique's responses and to the rest of our conversation about it. I'll shift next to Marie Katia Dorissant-Lefourie. Katia is an attorney and human rights defender. She is admitted to the Croix de Bouquet bar. For the last 4 years, she has been an attorney with the Bureau des Avocats Internationaux, BAI, where her primary focus is on sexual and gender-based violence cases for women who do not have the means to pay for attorneys to represent them. Katia, for the last 4 years, you have served as one of the lead lawyers for BAI's Rape Accountability and Prevention Program. This is a program that was started in response to the sharp rise in gender-based violence that followed the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. The same Universal Periodic Review report I mentioned earlier, as well as a separate one on justice sector challenges and impunity, found that Haiti's justice system has weak laws, institutions, and practices for preventing and addressing gender-based violence, and has more generally been weakened by increasingly authoritarian administrations in recent years. The current insecurity and the crumbling of democratic institutions have, in some cases, resulted in courts being completely unable to function, even as rates of gender-based violence have been going up due to that insecurity, the pandemic, and natural disasters. On a positive note, the Universal Periodic Review reports also note some improvements with respect to the treatment of survivors of gender-based violence, including due to the type of advocacy you undertake as part of your work at BAI. Could you tell us a bit about the most significant obstacles to women seeking accountability and protection from Haiti's justice sector, as well as perhaps some of the advances you've seen? Please talk as well about your rape accountability and prevention work and about why the BAI chooses to confront gender-based violence through the Haitian justice system, given its many challenges.
Ok, d'accord. Merci pour l'invitation. Merci. Alors, moi, c'est Marie Katia Dorissant-Lefourie. Moi, c'est un avocat qui est inscrit dans le barreau des Bouquets. Et depuis plus de 4 années, moi, intégré dans le bureau avocat international. Je collaboré pour défendre les femmes activistes qui civiques déjà dans la société haïtienne. Et je dis à moi, je expliquer nous qui combat BAI a mené pour combattre contre violence qu'a fait sous forme active dans la société haïtienne. Bureau avocat international BAI, qui c'est un cabinet avocat qui est spécialisé dans les droits humains. Mission principale, c'est goumer pour droit fondamental, si la qui faible respecté. Droit tant pour jeune justice à préparation, la constitution à convention internationale demande ça. Un objectif BAI, c'est accompagner victimes graves de violations de droits humains, victimes qui ont déjà agression sexuelle, victimes terroristes l'État, victimes choléra et femmes qui ont gardé petites pour soldats mission Nations Unies pour stabilité en Haïti. Victimes gros massacre tant pour massacre Raboto et la Saline. Et pour si là qui plus besoin renfort qu'à vivre dans quartier défavorisé à section communale. Pour jeune justice à préparation, Jean maman loi pays à convention internationale demande ça. C'est un travail BAI a fait maintenant avec Institut pour justice et démocratie IJDH depuis plus passé 25 ans. Dans ce sens ça, nous goumé contre violence qu'a fait sous droit femmes en Haïti. BAI mettait sous pied un programme qui est le Accountability Prevention Project. Objectif programme ça, c'est accompagner légalement toute victime qui a déjà été chérie. Pour jeune justice à préparation. BAI avec Médecins sans frontières à travers clinique même il y a un partenariat côté clinique prend même voyer toute victime déjà yo dans BAI de capable accompagner légalement. Et BAI gen l'autre allié tout qui c'est Favilec, Kofaviv, pour Namavid, pour citer seulement comme organisation qui peut référer BAI femmes activistes qui sont déjà dans la communauté côté BAI mettez programme en la campé, c'est parce que après le tremblement de terre 2010 là, te gen en pile femmes activistes qui t'a subi violence particulièrement dans camp yo. Sorti 2010 pour arriver jeudi a, BAI assisté plus passé 528 victimes cas déjà. 316 femmes et 212 filles. Parmi dossiers ça yo, gen plus passé 10 victimes qui déjà jeunes justice. Et 184 autres capitaines agressés à juger devant tribunal criminel sans assistance jury. Et il y a l'autre victime qui fait recours devant la cour d'appel à cassation parce que décision juge là pas respecter droit comme victime. Chiffre ça yo montre nous clair. Il n'est pas facile pour mener un combat pour droit femmes respecter en Haïti. C'est aussi là qui subit déjà. Yon nan travail BAI comme cabinet avocat qui est spécialisé dans le droit humain, c'est défendre droit monde qui victime, ça veut dire porter dossier victime yo devant tribunal qui compétent et puis fait plaidoirie pour demander application de la loi à convention internationale l'État haïtien signé et puis ratifié. Travail nous compliqué parce que grand pile obstacle sous chemin nous. D'abord, nous-mêmes, femmes avocats, qui défendent victimes déjà nous subissons en pile intimidation dans le tribunal. Si tous les parties si toutes les autres parties qui défendent présumé agressé à demander de négocier. Dans BAI, c'est justice d'abord, réparation ensuite. Pour nous continuer, femmes ou soit filles qui victime nan sibi en pile stigmatisation en dans système judiciaire haïtien. Plus souvent, il a cherché rendre responsable des actes de violence ici. Pour finir, système judiciaire en Haïti pas qu'à répondre pour la justice à réparation à victime. Tribunal yo mal fonctionné. Autorité judiciaire autant que commissaire gouvernement juge qui corrompu à passer droit victime en papier. Mettez tout ça en pile fois la loi pas appliquer pour qui va répondre à la réalité yo comme justiciable journée jeudi. Dans BAI nous arrivons comprendre plaidoirie pour contre pas permettre violence kaba sous forme active en Haïti. C'est pour ça dans le cadre plaidoyer BAI, il fait promotion pour droit civil et politique chaque femme haïtienne gagne pour participer dans la vie politique pays. On est à droit en dans la société comme citoyenne. BAI encourage tout à travers réseau femmes BAI pour yo engager yo et puis collaborer dans le travail BAI. Mais surtout solidariser avec l'autre femme qui subit déjà. Pour ça arriver fait, nous utilisons un dépliant BAI fait sortir sous déjà. En plus, BAI paraît dans ville Port-au-Prince. Li adjoint si la yo dans section communale yo. Et spécialement femmes yo avec programme engagement civique là. BAI sensibiliser femmes yo sous droit yo gagner pour participer dans la vie politique pays yo, dans discuter avec candidats k'ap gen pour présenter yo dans parlement, surtout dans voter budget national là. Avec programme si là, femmes yo conscient constitution en bail, tout citoyen droit pour regrouper yo en association pour yo manifester contre toute violation droit. Selon article 31 dans moment loi pays fait connaître dans organiser sitting, dans faire marche, dans faire conférence pour la presse. Face à toute répression la police fait manifestant, BAI gen yon programme observatoire liberté publique. Côté avocat yo observer mouvement revendication peuple là et puis accompagner yo devant tribunal pour yo joindre justice à réparation les ça nécessaire. Pour nous-mêmes dans BAI, bataille pour violence sous forme Kaba en Haïti, c'est un gros pas vers une transformation radicale et révolutionnaire en Haïti. Quelques changements dans le système judiciaire, tant pour dans la police là, pour y a une section genre, côté c'est plus femmes qui sont des victimes dans le commissariat et dans sous-commissariat. C'est plus commissaire femmes qui recevoir dossier qu'à déjà qui dans paquet. BAI fait allier yo, d'accord, et yo doit continuer porter message révolutionnaire pour gain égalité sociale dans mettant femmes et garçons. BAI a recommandé tout. Yon réforme faite dans le cadre légal système protection femmes activistes civiles, actes violence pour faire vide un crime, harcèlement sexuel, violence domestique, pour ne citer ça seulement. Côté une définition moderne sous acte qu'a déjà en Haïti. Finaliser avortement en Haïti pour respecter l'autonomie corporelle femme yo. Mais tout changer ça doit intégrer changement ça doit intégrer dans la constitution. Adopter et puis appliquer toutes mesures législatives qui garantissent égalité femmes et garçons. En plus, utiliser les ressources qui sont disponibles pour investir dans la réalisation qui permettent de nous atteindre l'objectif. Mettez sous pied un programme politique pour combattre la discrimination qu'a fait sur les femmes et puis créer des conditions pour les victimes de faire face à préjugés absurdis. Faire formation pour acteurs judiciaires, tant pour la police, autorité qui poursuivre agresseurs, pour d'abord considérer traumatisme victime et puis yo recevoir bon genre ressources qui permettent yo mener bon genre enquête médico-légale moderne investir dans l'autonomisation politique et économique femmes yo, dans faire formation, respecter principe quota et éliminer toute pratique discriminatoire, les n'a chercher travail et puis pour les n'a travail. Bay importance à enquête qui mène sur les femmes qui subissent violence, participation et puis représentation yo dans poste électique yo à gouvernemental yo et puis ratifier protocole facultatif CEDAW là. Merci.
Thank you, Mekatia, for sharing that. It was really interesting to hear some of the statistics that you put before us and some of your specific observations. And I'm already seeing some responsive questions in the chat, so look forward to talking more about what you just presented on. So I will finally introduce Monique Kleska. Monique spent over 25 years specializing in high-level policy dialogue, human rights, including especially the rights of women and youth, development, and crisis communication. She is a self-described feminist and an activist focusing on democracy and social justice. Among her many professional undertakings, she served as representative of the UN Population Fund in Niger, as a regional advisor for Africa, a regional advocacy and communication advisor for 22 Southern African countries, and an advocacy and communication officer for UNICEF Haiti. She is also a prolific writer who has appeared in major national and international publications, including Foreign Affairs, The New York Times, Le Nouveliste, Aibo Post, and many others. She has authored 2 books and I believe is working on a 3rd. Monique is also currently serving as the leader of the Commission for Search for a Haitian Solution to the Crisis. Monique, you have spent much of your career advancing women's rights and are currently one of the leading figures in the Commission for Search for a Haitian Solution to the Crisis, which is also known as the Montana Group, and which is leading a participatory effort at effectuating a democratic transition in Haiti and returning political power to Haiti's people. You are one of several incredible women to lead that process, and I know have been personally deeply thoughtful about how to use it to advance women's political participation and power in Haiti. This is against a history that both Pascal and Mekatia referenced of Haitian women being marginalized in politics, in public and economic leadership, as well as public spaces and the formal economy more generally. Indeed, today, Haiti has one of the lowest rates of women's political participation in the world, and Haitian women face significant barriers, including threats and violence, when they try to enter civic spaces. Could you please talk about Haitian women's social and political participation historically and today, including both opportunities of the present moment for building women's political power and social equality, as well as the risks and harms of failure to include women and girls in this process? And you muted, Monique.
Thank you. It really is an honor to be among this panel and to be involved today. So thank you for the invitation. With pleasure. Okay. About 80 years ago, in 1944, women in Haiti got the right to be political candidates, except for the presidency. This was the result of 10 years of advocacy of the first wave of feminists of the Ligue Féminine d'Action Sociale. Pascal mentioned that. In 1950, women got the right to vote, again, not for the president. 1957, 7 years later, women then had the right to vote for all posts. Despite these gains, women have been excluded culturally and purposely from positions of political power in Haiti for 218 years, except for 1 year, one woman, Juge Herta Pascal Trouillot. About 40 years ago, on April 3rd, 1986, close to 30,000 women mobilized to demand respect of the rights of women, including the right to political participation. So today, on March 8th, I say thank you to all these pioneering women on whose shoulders we stand on today. The first wave of feminists and the second wave of feminists who started the 1986 march. I personally come from strong Haitian women. My mother once told me, I saw men working, I saw women working, and I never saw the men. Where were the men, she was saying. And she actually told me that she was breastfed feminist milk. This is my mother talking. So this is extremely important for me to be able to pay homage to her, one of those strong pioneering Haitian women. Thank you. I think we see her here. I'm a little thrown off by seeing her because tomorrow will make 7 years that she has died. So sorry for the emotion. I didn't know that it would bring such emotion to me. Thank you. Yeah, perhaps we can remove. Thank you very much. Yeah. History teaches us the following. It's all about fighting for our rights. No one hands them over to you. No one says, hey, listen, here are your rights. No, we've got to fight for them. And I believe that is something that is extremely important for us to know. Today, what do we women want? We want full political participation. We want full equality in politics and in everything else. I will speak to you then about this and how to change things positively in Haiti. First, what is the situation today? Here are some data points. Women make up 52% of the population. In contrast, women make up 3% of the parliament during the last session per the worldwide indicator. That means Haiti occupies spot 186 out of 193 countries. Imagine 193 countries, Haiti is 186. We are at the bottom of the world. Why? You must be asking. Why are women not participating in politics or very little? Well, in 2020, I was involved in a European Union-funded diagnostic and communication initiative to spearhead change in this area. And this diagnostic was done by one of Haiti's leading feminists, Karine Clermont, a sociologist. Why? Because Haiti has signed all the convention in terms of the rights of women and equality. Every time Haiti goes to one of those big to-dos by the UN, they sign everything, but then nothing is done. But there is an important date that is coming. It is 2030. All the countries in the world will line up to say, where are we now in terms of equality? So that will be the reckoning. Now, the diagnostic revealed three main causes for little or no participation of women in political offices. The first one is the social cultural cause, how we are brought up, how we are educated, social norms, violence towards women candidates is also linked to this patriarchy. Political, the leadership of political parties, it's men. The party apparatus are men. It is a social norm because men run those political parties. The third cause is financial. The lack of access of women to money. Their references, very often they are informal. Their jobs, very often they're in commerce, they're in the streets busy, Madame Sarah. Their finances, where do they have financial records to show to the banks? It is also a social norm because men run these financial institutions. Now, moving forward, having said this, to resolve the problems, women do not want favors. We don't want what a former President Boniface Alexandre said to us in a very disparaging and demeaning manner, asked us in April 2021, we did this for you, what more do you want? We don't want that. We have fought, we have died, we have been hit, slapped, and continue to fight for our rights. We don't want quotas to placate us. We want full participation. We realize that if we are not around the table, we and our issues will be eaten alive. That's what's happening. So the future is now, and women are recognizing it. Now, Haiti is in the midst of a deep existential crisis. And Pascal Solage talked about that. And this is a crucial moment to change the old ways into very innovative, transparent, inclusive, democratic ways of political discourse, leadership, and management. Out of this chaos, we recognize there is an opportunity for building women's political power and social equality. This is the moment for the change we are seeking, and it is an important moment. Recently, I toured the countryside and met with women leaders from the north to the south, to the east, to the west of Haiti. Two things are clear to me. One of them, they all said, "Pa gen l'État," there is no state apparatus. They told me that everywhere. Two, women are running the country. They're running the healthcare. They are everywhere doing work with gender-based violence because it is pervasive and throughout the country. And they are the ones who are providing food for us. And they are running the informal sector. So let me share some good news for you. I saw profound leadership in these women throughout the countryside, whether it be Wanamet, Kai, Tigwav, Torbec, Jeremy, they are there. So something to me, that is something that is extremely important, and I wanted to mention that. Now, where do we go from here? What we have to do now is Fokyola, as Pascal said, is one of the here you find these beautiful women that I met while we were going throughout the countryside in Haiti. Now, what comes next? Let me share the good news then. Yes, there is profound leadership. They are a most important political force. And another thing that I found was very interesting, they are talking about the issues and how these issues affect their lives. It was nothing rhetorical. And to me, that was extraordinary. The women are talking about justice. How are they talking about justice? They are talking about justice because they realize in their work on gender-based violence that why is it that women who are victims are not able to get justice? They are saying to themselves why, and they're realizing one of the big reasons why is because the men are judges. Almost all the judges are men. They are saying, why can't we get credit? The bankers are men. They are asking for microcredit. They're asking for credit unions. Why can't they get health care when they're pregnant or simply when they are sick? They're asking, why are the men blocking us? Why aren't there health centers? So I think these women leaders really are seeing that the issues, they are living them and they want to resolve them. And they are coming to a political consciousness that we need to be there so that we can help resolve these issues. So one of the things that I say is that change has already started. It's true, because what I saw, it's change. I saw women committed to doing community development. I saw women building a better life for themselves and for their communities. I saw women committed to the ideas of education, justice, good health. I saw strong, brave Haitian women who want to shape the future of Haiti. They are also realizing that if they want these things, if they want their lives to be changed, they must be in power to take these decisions. Not power to be in power, but power to change the lives of women and of their communities in a positive manner. Now, more good news. Politically, as Sasha said, I am part of the commission pour la recherche d'une solution haïtienne à la crise. Women constitute 38% of it. That's good. Close to 52%, but it's good. Women constitute also 50% of the directorate of the transitional council that was put up. And that is something that is important. Media doesn't want to hear our voices. That too must change, but we are here and we are speaking up. Another good news, the campaign Fuck Yola that came from the diagnostic that Karine Clermont and myself did is a good initiative that made inroads. There was an evaluation that showed we moved the bar among those who heard or saw our key messages. The first message was, Kote Medamyo, where are we? How come we're 52% of the population, but it's 3% in the parliament? Women have the right to be in high-level political posts, and women have the capacity to be in high-level posts. Women are interested in holding political offices. They told us this, and this must continue. So Fuck Yola is also working with several political parties right now to have a gender protocol for recruiting and training women candidates. And we are in the process of developing a political action committee, a PAC, that will support and provide strategic and financial assistance to women who respect our rights-based charter and women who are integrity. We need to build this into a movement. Now, what is the bad news? The bad news are the risks and harms of failure to include women and girls in this process. We realize there is violence, and I think Pascal mentioned that, and Katia mentioned that there is violence against women. We know that. There is violence against women who are candidates. We know that also. One of the big risks is that Haiti is not taking full advantage of the genius of Haitian women, what we call l'adresse femme, to spearhead its development. Haitian women are innovative. We do things different ways. I mean, the country is standing, a lot of it is because of our force courage. So, it's going to waste. We need these brains to be in power. And then there is a second part, which is the illegitimacy of democracy if half of the population, which are women, are excluded. How can you say you're being Democrats if you don't want half of the population in there? What are you doing? And then there is the shame of being last, being 186 out of 193 countries. That is shameful, and that is not part of where we want to be. And Haiti needs to be progressing. So we're moving forward. We cannot let our guard down. That's one of the things that I have observed. Nobody is letting our guard down. Women are fighting, and they're saying, as I always say, c'est goumelier. It's a fight. Not for one moment are we letting our guards down. We have to fight to be present. We cannot be shy. We cannot expect men to propose us, to bring us in. No, they're busy doing their thing, their power thing. No, it's up to us. We have to be in the front. We have to make our voices heard. We have to take our places up front, up to 52%. We need equality, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique, for that call to action, that confirmation of the good news and the forceful battle being waged by amazing Haitian women all over the country. I think I speak for all of us in saying it's incredibly powerful to hear about that, and we appreciate all of your work, all of our other panelists' work. And just really appreciate your being with us to share all this today. So we'll now switch to the question and answer portion of this conversation. So I'd ask all of our panelists to turn on their cameras and keep them on. I'd very much welcome all three of you to respond to any of the questions posed, although I will probably pose them to particular individuals, but please weigh in if you have additional thoughts or information that you think bear in on this. I also invite you to pose questions to one another, since I think we're all really keen to learn from your perspectives and what you think is important. And so very much want this to be a conversation among all of us. So I might start, Mekatia, with you. You talked about the ways in which the BAI uses the legal system as its primary means for confronting gender-based violence. But as you and Monique and Pascal referenced in your presentations, violence against women is really linked to a lot of other social factors. And so I'm curious what you think are complementary activities to the kind of legal advocacy that BAI pursues that need to be undertaken in order to genuinely reduce the rates of sexual and gender-based violence, and to support survivors and to promote women's equality more generally.
Ok, d'accord, merci pour question. Et premièrement, nous gagnons à part de plaidoirie que BAI fait les mêmes côtés que les porter dossiers dans le tribunal qui compétent pour tendre dossiers pour victimes dans les mêmes pour capable de justice à réparation. Bah qui est important que nous fait plaidoirie. Plaidoyer c'est aller dans zone reculée, nous fait formation pour femmes actives qui subissent cas déjà qui nous faire conscient à travers des documents que BAI mettait en place, nous conscientiser, nous capables de faire connaître droit avec les droits violés. Donc c'est dans le contexte ça BAI lui-même engagé dans la société pour capable faire pression à travers plaidoirie avocat et participation victime et alliés dans cadre plaidoyer pour capable faire loi yo devait appliquer dans le tribunal.
Thank you, Mekatia. And I also want to flag that there was a question posed in connection with protections for women and girls who have been raped that May Abigail, who is a colleague of Mekatia at BAI, responded to in the chat. So encourage everyone to read that response, which I think was very thoughtful. Pascal, one of the questions that I was hoping to have you expand on from your earlier discussion is that you and I have previously talked about the shrinking civic space in Haiti and the threats that human rights defenders and activists for women's equality in particular face in the present moment. Could you talk to us about your observations and the limitations of the Haitian government's response and the kind of action and support you think is needed to address it? And if you're willing to share some of your personal story in this context, I know our audience would be really interested to hear it.
Okay, as I said, I make my English, but I will give my answers in Creole. So, ça qui est important peut-être avant que rappeler le contexte que nous commençons à parler. Moi, chercher aide parce que personnellement et avec un pile membre dans la famille et un pile organisation, moi, t'as subi un pile à partir de juillet 2021 et référé ou même pour te chercher aide, etc. Donc, tout ça pour moi être que nous fait ou bien que implication politique nous, implication citoyenne nous, en tant qu'activistes, représenter une grosse menace pour nous en Haïti, sur la vie nous, sur la vie famille nous, et sur la vie monde qui a collaboré avec nous. Moi quitté Haïti pratiquement moins d'une semaine après que assassiné une zamim, une qui c'est un activiste qui c'est Antoinette Duclerc que m'a salué mais moi quelques jours après l'assassinat ancien président Jovenel Moïse. Donc, c'est parce que et côté que nous étions obligés de déplacer des membres famille nous qui étaient payés une organisation qui et gagner que nous sommes obligés de voir dans l'autre département, gagner nous sommes obligés de voir dans l'autre pays et plus particulièrement expérience avec une membre qui était un bébé de qui était un bébé et qui était à l'abri dans le département du Sud et qui 14 août était victime pendant tremblement de terre là parce que c'est là nous te voyé à l'abri pour recevoir menace la Kaili dans Port-au-Prince et côté que Kai était blessé et bébé était blessé tout nous t'es obligé de déplacer encore voyer dans l'autre pays à ce moment-là. Donc c'est pas un bagage qui est spécifique à moi-même ou bien à l'organisation Negesmao. En Haïti, avec question impunité, avec question corruption, avec question non-accès à justice, presque tout activiste, presque tout le monde, et particulièrement femmes, qui décident d'impliquer dans fait politique, qui décident de dénoncer, qui décident de mettre contribution par eux dans des batailles contre corruption, dans des batailles pour droits femmes. Yo même yo représenter des menaces et yo gagné des gens dans la population qui ciblent yo et qui attaquent yo et c'est ça nous t'ai subi des attaques sur cas personnel nous sur bureau nous sur diverses plateformes et réseaux sociaux nous que nous t'ai expérimenté pendant des mois. Journée jodi nous gain accompagnement et avocat, accompagnement diverses structures en Haïti qui aider nous dans la justice, mais c'est pour dire que c'est des menaces qui existaient sous dos en pile activistes, en pile monde qui décidait impliquer dans le pays d'Haïti. Je ne dis moi-même moi pas en pays, moi j'ai famille qui pas en pays parce que jusqu'à présent menaces existaient réel et parce que moi pas grande femme qui vivent et moi vivre tout le moi était décidé aller dans élection même j'aime dit moi était très jeune côté que moi était subi une violence extrême, violence verbale, violence physique, des menaces extrêmes parce que moi j'étais une femme qui était décidée impliquée dans la politique et en plus une femme qui était décidée affirmer tête les féministes donc décidément qui était tout a subi des violences. N'a pas rappelé que nous étions un ancien président qui était qu'on a pas adressé des propos haineux, des propos de violence contre un journaliste en Liliane Pierre-Paul et que toute société en tape danser dans carnaval sous ça, en pile monde te fait même bouche. Donc en fait, il vient acceptable dans la société en côté que des séries de monde bay tête le droit pour porter des menaces, pour porter des attaques et même retirer la vie des femmes qui décident eux-mêmes yo pas fermer bouche qui décident eux-mêmes yo gen parole par yo action par yo pour yo porter en dans société et me pense que pratiquement tout le monde vive li toute femme vive li dans espace ou vive li dans relation interpersonnelle parce qu'on joindre des monde k'ap goumen avant tout dans même espace avant tout qui pratiquement c'est des menaces tout mais société en général organisée pour que ou capable subir et ça qui va arriver même Jean-Maître Kata so dit c'est que comme nous, dans société, côté que pas accès à la justice, côté que il y a très peu de sanctions, côté que il y a impunité qui est étalée, et côté que même, j'aime te dire, pas une loi contre violence sous femme en soi, ça veut dire pas un cadre légal qui existait même pour contre violence sous femme, pas une loi contre harcèlement, et des corruption généralisée dans le système judiciaire là, ça fait que ça crée un terrain qui propice pour que violence ça continue, yo pérenniser, yo augmenter et que continuer fait sous activistes en dans pays. Donc je dis moi-même en pile collègue moi qui en dans nous pas dormir par exemple, moi parler de Negesmao, mais en pile collègue moi qui en dans nous pas dormir qui c'est des jeunes femmes même j'avais qui étaient très actifs en dans mouvement Petro-Caraïbe Challenge, soit yo pas en dans pays en journée jodi ou bien obligé mettre à l'abri ou bien mettre des mécanismes en place pour protéger tête yo, protéger famille parce que a subi. Moi-même organisation Negesmao fait partie de Accord Montana que Monique c'est une monde qui vraiment travaille en pile là-dedans. Nous pas dormir que me fait partie de lui, fait partie de Accord Montana. Ça veut dire nous-mêmes nous vraiment impliquer nous à tous les niveaux dans essayer protéger l'autre offre politique en dans pays pour nous changer conditions la vie nous. Et tout ça fait que yo ciblé nous, tout ça fait que nous subissons menace. Même Jean se dit, même Jean et Monique dit De tout temps, les
Her
femmes
pace is too
haïtiennes,
fast.
femmes haïtiennes, t'es toujours qu'on subit menace. De tout temps, femmes haïtiennes,
Pascal, do you mind pausing for a moment?
Gen qui mourir, yo subi en dans pays. Et ça pour nous c'est des leçons, c'est des héritages pour nous connaître que journée jodi, nous supposons continuer bataille. OK.
Thank you, Pascal, for your passion, for the powerful story that you shared with us. Unfortunately, it was a little bit challenging to hear you. So we didn't quite catch everything, but we will be recording this event. So, we are recording this event. So hopefully it is something that you can go back and hear. Pascal, when you're responding in Creole in the future, if you could switch to the Creole channel, that will help the translators. And just a reminder to everyone to slow down.
Yeah. Sasha, could I say something? I just want to
Please.
add. Yeah, thank you. There was a question about women living with handicap and violence. And when I was in Gonaive recently, there was a group, women living with handicap, who were part of the diagnostic I was doing of women's organizations. And she was saying that, you know, they suffer from a lot of violence. And my question was, do you have any data? And there was no data. And that is one of the big issues with doing advocacy, is the absence of data. You need the data to be able to say, yes, this is the situation. So yes, it is true, because they were saying it. Yeah, women who live with handicap, living with handicap, suffer violence. But do they suffer more violence than other women? I do not know. They seem to think so. But one of the things that I highly recommended was get the data, get the information down, and you can do your advocacy, and you can get perhaps more resources to be able to provide support, etc. But they are part of the larger group. And I saw that in two different places, both I believe in Wanamet and also in Gonaive, where groups of women living with handicap are part of those wider groups. Thank you. I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Monique. And I very much echo your sentiment about the need for better data collection. It was actually one of the recommendations that we and BEI and COFAVIV included in our submission to the Universal Periodic Review process on gender-based violence. There's just a general lack of data. And Mekatia, since Monique started responding to this question in the chat, I'm wondering if you have anything to add to the question of whether there is any effort as part of BAI's program to support victims of sexual and gender-based violence to reach individuals who are at a particularly high risk or who have particular vulnerabilities in addition to being a woman. So for example, young girls or deaf women, or perhaps women with other handicap. And I would maybe also add into this category women in rural communities who might have even less access to the justice system. Mekatia, are you able to respond? You're muted right now. I'm sorry, what was that? Absolutely. I just wanted to ask you, Monique just started responding to this question from our audience, and I'm wondering if you have anything to add, whether BAI has any efforts that are particularly directed to supporting women and girls with additional vulnerability. So for example, individuals with handicaps or individuals who are deaf or young girls. And perhaps I would also add to this, sort of a question of special effort to reach women in rural communities who have less access to a lot of resources that are present in bigger cities.
Ok, d'accord, merci pour la question. Et concernant les femmes qui ont un handicap, nous, PAI, lui-même, lui mettait en place un partenariat que nous gagnons avec des interprètes qui interpréter le que, par exemple, il n'est pas capable de parler. Nous avons un dossier comme ça, nous avons un dossier dans BAI qui a un bébé qui est victime de violence sexuelle. Et BAI lui-même, lui permet que victime les joignent un interprète qui peut interpréter pour lui. Dans le niveau, soit parquet, ou bien tribunal de première instance, ou bien dans le jugement définitif. Et BAI travaille tout, nous allons dans une zone reculée, nous participer avec femmes, toute qualité femmes qui indiquent en droit avec devoir et surtout les droits violés. Donc, dans le contexte ça, BAI toujours mettait des idées avec action en place pour nous capables de défendre droits femmes actives, que ce soit les handicapés ou pas, joindre justice à réparation.
Thank you, Mekatia. Yeah, please, Monique, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add something about the data. Now, in the UN system, UNFPA, the Population Fund, is the lead agency for gender-based violence. So they play a huge role in terms of gender-based violence data collection. Now, they have a system that is used by the UN and NGOs throughout the world in humanitarian situations. The IMIS, GBV, IMIS. Now, I've been pushing that could be used in a regular system. Now, you have Justice Epée that has data. You have the police department that has data. You have OPC that has data. You have the ministère, because women who are violated go to the ministry also. You have all the different agencies. You have NGOs like Neges Marron. You have SOFA. You have ASFADA. You have all of them. And I saw also you have little organizations, us they know, Les Iwa, that are collecting data. There is a mass of data. To me, this aspect of data on gender-based violence is one of those areas that needs a massive chita palais and figuring out what system to use, bring everybody together so we can get the data together. There is a lot of stuff that's written on longhand paper and stuck in a lot of drawers in different places. So I do believe it is an emergency to get data to be able to have an idea of what the real situation is. And I am terrified that it is worse than what we know that it is. Thank you. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, Monique. And that is also my sense from doing research, because I think, especially with gender-based violence, it is frequently underreported and is specifically underreported in Haiti. So whatever information we have, it is just a fraction of it. And I see one of our participants today, Faith, is sharing that they might have information to share. So Faith, I hope you'll share with our group, and you can send it to us and we'll disseminate to those who participated in the seminar today. And I echo Monique's call that it's really necessary to aggregate and to really publish the information that is available and to do a better job of gathering it. So Monique, maybe I'll stay with you, including because there were also a couple of questions from the audience in connection with your presentation. So you and I have discussed before your personal efforts to ensure that the Commission's Montana Accord and related policies include adequate provisions for women's empowerment and include actual women in the transition. I'd love it if you could talk about those efforts and whether you feel they've been successful, and whether there is more that can be done, and if there's any support that would be helpful for you, perhaps that some of those in the audience might be able to provide. And sort of in addition to that question, for me, I just want to also note a couple questions, similar questions that we got from the audience, if you want to also consider them in your response. So one from Valeska Maurice, adding the observation that the Montana agreement, and I think you presented maybe some contrary data, but to Valeska Maurice's observation, has few women represented, and what are steps being taken to ensure that fast forward the discussions, negotiations, and different agreements include a larger women participation and are actually given space to occupy central leadership positions. There's also a question from Paul Namphy complimenting your diagnosis of the problem, and noting that the commission made a decision that the program not have a specific gender ask in the platform. It was mentioned by commission leaders that women's subgroup made a strategic decision not to have those asks front and center in the overall set of asks. And his question is, won't that backfire given what you mentioned today about the need for explicit political power in the hands of women, et cetera?
Just one question. What is a gender ask? ASK. I read that question also. I didn't quite understand what it is, but we got it.
I think it means making a request, yeah, but.
Okay, now let me put it that way. The commission that started working in a 6th of March, we've been working now 1 year, has a 38% women. And one woman was in a leadership position. She was coordinator. There were other, in terms of people public speaking, porte-parole, we had 1 man and 1 woman, so that was 50%. Plus I was the porte-parole for outside of Haiti in terms of the English speaking world. And there was another woman who dealt with the Spanish speaking world. So in that sense, I think we covered the leadership roles properly. Now, when it came down to the Bureau de Suivi, it was a different situation because there you had the political wing that nominated people, and you had the civil society wing that nominated people so they could be part of the Bureau de Suivi. So in that case, out of 21, we were 7. So that is not good. Now, in terms of the document, the Montana Accord, when you read the Montana Accord, we spent a lot of time making it, gendering it, so that wherever, and some of the lawyers wrote, le président, le premier ministre, we spent enormous time. Le président ou la présidente, le premier ministre ou la première ministre. We made sure we did that. And in the accord also, we had put that it needed to be, we had to have gender equity. That was one of the things that we asked for. However, and I think it's linked to one of the lessons I learned, and I know that I had discussed that with Sasha prior to this panel, that you can't let your guard down. You think that it's written and it's going to be followed. No, it was not followed by all. And I kept on nagging and harassing some of the members. How many women do we have in the Transitional Council? How many women? How many women? And because I was not following day by day, believing that, yes, it says you have to have it, therefore it will be there. No, you have to check, you have to verify, you have to harass, you have to just never let your eye off the ball. And that's one of the things that I learned the hard way. Now, when, for example, in terms of the Transitional Council, the rules came about, well, another lawyer did it, and it was, well, it would be, ce serait souhaitable, it would be good that there be some women in the directorate. I personally changed it to say the directorate should be 50-50. 50% women, 50% men. And it stayed. And the directorate of the National Council is 50-50. And it stayed. So there are little gains, there are little failures, but one of the things that I think that I learned, and to me, that is a big gain that I'm sharing with you all, it's that you have to consistently stay with your eye on the prize and move it forward, and even help identifying women. Because at one point I said, well, listen, the human rights sector, you have 3 people. Well, you need to have women. How many? Do it. And it takes time to look, because it is not part of the social norm in Haiti to have the women come forward naturally, or to have the men identify women, or to have the women just, listen, I want to do this. Very often we're seen as aggressive, whatever, but that's what it is. We have to fight for it, and we will continue to fight for it. But the point I'm making is nobody is going to gift us, put it on a silver platter and said, this is for you. What they're willing is, well, the 30% quota. I don't buy this. Why 30%? We're 52% of the population. Why can't it be 50%? Why must it be 30% that you're doing us a favor? So these are the kinds of things that I think are important to know, are important to follow. And that is the experience that I had. Now, I have admitted some failure. I have admitted some of the success that we have had. And I keep on saying that this is a moment that, as we are seeking change for Haiti, this is a moment for women to be up there pushing for change also, because if we say we need democracy, and we are saying this, then we need democracy and women need to be there. If we say we need the best minds, well, who are some of the best minds of Haiti? They are women, l'adresse femme, the genius of Haitian women. So we are there, and we need to have that kind of support so that we can push women. Because of the violence, a lot of them say no. A lot of them are scared. And, with reason. Parce que gen mouri là-dedans. Gen mouri là-dedans. Gen pile mouri là-dedans. And Antoinette Duclair made that, she's the example of gen mouri là-dedans. She died for this. She died for us. So we have to be conscious of that. But we can do this. We can do this. I know we can do this, and we are doing it.
Thank you, Monique. I so appreciate that call, and I want to echo what you said and quote, unfortunately, deceased Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said that there would be enough women on the Supreme Court when there are 9, which is the total number of justices on the Supreme Court. So I say, let's keep aiming high. We are unfortunately at time, which breaks my heart because I'm loving this discussion. I'm hoping our panelists don't mind sticking around for another 10 minutes just to give us a chance to wrap up. And to that end, I want to quickly ask Pascal a question that I just think we shouldn't finish without addressing in some way, and maybe Monique and Mekatia can add their thoughts as well. But it's the fact that women and girls have many intersecting identities. For example, women in rural areas might have very different interests and needs than those in Port-au-Prince. They might also be divided based on traits like social or economic class, and even age. So how do you think about advancing gender equality when taking into advance such differences? And if you have particular examples from your grassroots organizing, as well as from bringing in a gender perspective when working on other issues such as anti-corruption with MUPAB Domi, I think that would be really interesting to hear.
Thank you. all Haitian women and girls experience discrimination, violence, exclusion related to patriarchy, but they don't experience it in the same way. And it's important to address the intersectionality of discrimination experienced by Haitian women and how all those vulnerabilities impact women differently. So being a woman, being a girl living in a rural area, increase this vulnerability. And it's important to remember that one of the biggest challenge in Haiti is centralization of power, of resources, of services, of information, and this centralization of everything in one part of in the national territory, in this case, the West Department, to the detriment of the population living in the rest of the country, is a political will, is a model of governance. It's absence of vision, and it's a lack of competence. So in Haiti, rural women have less access to health, care, drinking water, electricity, academic training, information, technology, justice, and financing. And girls in rural areas are more likely to drop out of school and already have less access to education, especially because of early pregnancies. So they are also the most vulnerable in situation of natural disasters. And it should be remembered that they represent 44% of the agricultural workforce in the country. So they also bear most of the unpaid tasks, domestic chores, childcare, and other people who need it in the family or in the community. And therefore, the struggle for gender equality cannot be done outside of a global struggle to change the system and mode of governance. So there must be deep and structural change that will allow for progress in all communities. So it's not enough to hold beautiful ceremonies in October 15, International Day of Rural Women, to set up projects with NGOs, to distribute agricultural materials, without the input of the first concern, the rural women themselves. And we can observe the bit of failure of the project has Caravan Changement of former President Jovenel Moïse, which was above all of a vast operation of corruption in the West. So we must think of gender equality in a global vision of improving the condition of rural women, considering their specific realities. And we see that in our work in Neges Mawo. We need to learn from solid projects that have been set up by rural women themselves in rural area for decades, that allow them to have real autonomy and real power to change their condition. And rural women are very powerful and influential in the social structures in the community, churches, cooperatives, associations. So it's necessary to understand how to duplicate and carry this influence into the political space. So rural women make commerce work in Haiti through the Madame Sarah. When you talk about that, this branch of the Haitian economy must be formalized, protected, and strengthened by strengthening the power of and training of women. So finally, we must give real power to local elected women. Finally, we must we make services accessible in the communities and capitalize on the invaluable human potential of women living in rural areas. So there's perhaps some of the avenue for reflection to address the exclusion of women and girls living in those areas. Addressing gender equality with this intersectional approach will make it possible to work on all other factors of vulnerability that women can accumulate in Haiti: skin color, social class, economic level of education, ages, and others. So
thank you for that, Pascal. And Mekatia, I know BI really focuses on bringing justice and information and power to the most marginalized women, the poorest, the ones least able to access sources of power or the justice sector. Is there anything that you would add to what Pascal just shared? Mekatia?
Ok, ça, on est capable d'ajouter à l'intervention Pascal là, et moi, je dis que vraiment, effectivement, femmes, surtout femmes qui vivent en dehors, sont vraiment vulnérables. Ils sont vraiment vulnérables, ils n'ont pas gagné moyens, ils n'ont pas gagné droit à santé, ils n'ont pas respecté, droit l'éducation pas respectée, victime de violence. Et vraiment, même qui ont commencé à aller à l'école, à travers que une victime de viol, ils sont obligés de quitter l'école. Ils sont obligés de quitter l'école à cause de une grossesse prématurée qu'ils ont gagné. Ils sont obligés de marier tout avec un monde que aux parents, mais ça là, c'est droit qui violé. Et puis, nous gagnons information que nous faisons. BAI fait surtout dans femmes reculées avec femmes reculées ça yo côté que à travers des pliants BAI travaille avec eux pour faire connaître les droits à la santé au volet droit à la santé droit à l'éducation côté droit au logement tout ça yo rentrer dans phase côté que nous-mêmes nous voulons porter travail là plus toujours. Ok, nous engager nous plus toujours dans le travail ça que BAI a fait pour une façon pour femmes qui vivent en dehors capable sentir vraiment yo ces femmes pour que yo faut droit yo respecter tant que toute femme et que nous gagnons rester avec eux tout parce que surtout dans le milieu reculé nous toujours en pile rester avec et BAI travaille avec eux, nous accompagnons surtout les violés, nous accompagnons la justice et dans le tribunal, capable de justice à préparation. Et en tant que femme, nous voulons dire que BAI lui-même, il recevoir surtout en pile intimidation, les nous-mêmes femmes, avocats, accompagner victimes au tribunal. Dès que nous arrivons, on dit que nous sommes même avec femmes qui sont victimes, nous avons stigmatisé les femmes, nous avons toujours demandé le ça qui va faire dans le moment ça qui va payer, ou pas de là dans le moment ça, ou pas de gagner rad ça sous une façon pour inciter, pas rentrer dans peine. Alors les gens violés sont peine, c'est dans la tristesse, ils pas vraiment mettre dans pour comprendre situation difficile au contraire yo plutôt stigmatisé donc nous dans BAI nous plus travaille toujours avec femmes qui en dehors yo pour nous capable faire connaître droit yo ak devoir yo pour yo connaître les droits yo violés. Merci.
Thank you for that, Mikatia. So we are completely out and over time, but I want to leave everyone with, in addition to my joyful wishes for a happy International Women's Day, I'm wondering if maybe our panelists can leave everyone with their final words on what keeps you doing this difficult and increasingly dangerous and life-threatening work. So if you could share kind of what gives you hope and what keeps you going. And I noticed someone in the chat earlier asked, Danielle asked, if there are any victories that you could maybe share. I know this is an abysmally little time to give you, but if maybe each of you could take 30 to 45 seconds to answer that, maybe starting with Monique, I think that would be a really wonderful way to conclude.
Thank you. I think I spoke a little bit about some of the small victories and some of the small failures also. But I think ultimately the key message for me is it's a fight. We have to stay with it. We have to keep at it all the different ways that we can. Nobody is going to gift us with equality. No, it's not going to come that way. It's going to be us who are going to get it. And I think we should not underplay it. We should go for a full equality and not little bits of whatever. And I think it's important women to encourage women to be upfront about the political power and not, to kind of flip the script. So political power is not about power. It is about the possibility that you have to be able to direct and to set and to manage public policy to make people's lives better. And I think it is important that that message be carried out throughout and incessantly, and ask women to do this. They're already doing it in the grassroots organizations. They're already doing it throughout the countryside. Now they need to be upfront doing it, going to Kazek, AZEC, mayor's office, etc. And just one last thing, some of them who have gone, for example, to the mayor's office, one of the things that they're realizing is they were there just for show. They can't even sign in terms of the bank account. The men are saying, no, 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 you don't need to go to be in the bank, on the bank account. So real power is making sure that you are there, you hold the reins so that you can make a life better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Monique. Pascal, maybe you could go next.
I am a nation woman, so I have the legacy of million women of my country who fight for their freedom, who fight for their identities. So I went for political post at young age because I assume, and I say it every day, I want power. I need power for change my life and for change the life of the women, for change the life of the Haitian in my country. And I don't accept the bare minimum because I'm a woman. I don't accept the bare minimum because I'm a nation. So I fight for what I deserve. I fight for what I need. And the last one, I need to live in my country. I want to stay in my country. I want that my country be an option for me and for my children, and I have to fight for it. So I don't afraid being a feminist, being a political activist, being a woman, an angry woman, because I want to fight for what I need, for what I deserve. And because I have example as women like Monique or other feminists in my country, or like my mom, because my mom is my first feminist model. So I want living in a country where I am a human being who can live in dignity and freedom. So I think this is why I fight for my country and for my life in Haiti. And I just want everyone understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. That is so powerful. And Mekatia, if you could maybe give us the final word.
Ok, moi, dernier moment que moi gagné, c'est en tant que femme qui a boumé pour droit. Femme qui victime qui a déjà dans la société, c'est continuer boumé pour loi capable de appliquer pour mon victime capable de une justice à préparation. C'est ça qui mobilise nous plus. Et nous voulons pour toute femme dans la société à mobiliser et puis capable intégrer dans la vie civile et économique des pays et puis capable faire passer volonté, faire passer parole et que pour pas faire parler les victimes qui déjà faut qu'ils parlent pour capable joindre justice. Et en tant que femme avocat, nous continuons de bataille, pour toute femme capable de justice et préparation dans la société. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mekatia, Pascal, Monique. This was an incredible conversation. I leave inspired and awed by the work that you do, and just want to uplift again and repeat what Pascal said about needing to seize power for ourselves and for Haiti. And just thank you so much for being with us. If maybe we could go to the next slide, which has some information for any of you who want to support financially some of the important work that you heard about today. I think we can leave it here with, again, a deep thank you to our panelists and just a clarion call for fighting for women's justice, which is also Haiti's justice. Thank you all very much.